Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about 2 soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games that they come from without getting too bogged down in music theory. Joe, what are this week's games?
Up first is 2021's Behind the Frame, The Finest Scenery, an emotional tale about memories and painting, portrayed by gorgeous artwork and a fantastic, laid-back soundtrack.
Following that is what's seen as the first tactical role-playing game to have significant success in the United States. And it was published by Sega, because it's not that now famous Nintendo property. 1993's Shining Force. There is not a lot that is similar between these two games, but you know what? When you look at the key art, what's on the box, at least in North America, the main characters are both in a left profile, like facing right to left. It's really odd that that's, you look at our thumbnail for the episode and that's it.
They're like back to back.
Although the Shining Force guy, Max, is like torqued weirdly so you can like see his butt and all that. It's like what they did with Tracer, but back in the early 90s, I guess.
Beautiful. I mean, I wouldn't have it any other way, except for a lot of ways, but I'll accept this.
Joe, it's a good thing to report that we have at least a rough draft pulled together for Best of 2022, because we have one more episode after this until that episode, and that's insane.
Oh god, the year's almost over. We've got a possible final top 10. There's just one more Spectre release getting ready to come out that is keeping it from being finalized, but honestly, if I had to take a guess, this is probably what we're going to end up with at the end.
Yeah, I would say so too. And it's a pretty good list. Looking forward to pulling that together. But in the meantime, how are you doing? What are you playing?
Well, I haven't really been playing a lot. Basically just the mystery RPG that I've been playing that I've told like 2 people what it is. I'm almost done with it. I'll be done with it next time we record for sure. But it's a pretty good game, but boy howdy, it's got some jank to it.
I know what this RPG is, and yeah, you could say that. I haven't been playing much either. We're in the thick of Christmas planning and whatnot, but I got to make more progress on Kirby. Kirby and the Forgotten Land is a good time so far from what I've played, and I'm looking forward to getting to it more.
Yeah, Kirby and the Forgotten Land is I think maybe in my top 10 games of the year. It's really fun, and its final boss is wild, so I can't wait to see you get to that.
Well, that's just par for the course for a Kirby game, I feel like.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we'll see.
This is just more of that goodness. I love that final boss. It's so stupid.
Well, speaking of Kirby and the Forgotten Land, it won Best Family Game at the Game Awards. So let's talk about the Game Awards for our composer follow-up news this week, highlighting many different composers and musicians on this show. We like to kind of keep tabs on what they're doing, especially when their names come up in relation to the video game industry headlines of the week. We put our last episode out a couple days before the Game Awards went live on December 8th, and now that they're out, we can talk about what happened. We were pretty good on our predictions. I'll say that. Not too bad with the predictions there. God of War Ragnarok won Best Score and Music. And for the first time in Game Award history, it was revealed on stage during the main show. The composer got to come up. Great moment. Well overdue. Thank you, Jeff Keighley, for listening to that one. As expected, Elden Ring did win Game of the Year.
Yep, saw that coming. Interesting things right after that.
Bill Clinton.
Yep, that's the one. I also really like, speaking of God of War and the composer, they performed a song from God of War, and just while the song is going, Bear McCreary's just standing behind the vocalist, just going off on this hurdy-gurdy, which is not a sentence I ever thought I would say about the Game Awards. And it was great.
It was amazing, and it was with Hozier, and they did Blood Upon the Snow, which is the end credits theme to that game. It's so good, and yeah, shouts out to Bear. We mentioned that he's in God of War Ragnarok as Rabe, as a dwarf musician in Svartalfheim, and that you can't miss him in the main campaign. So yeah, going to town on that hurdy-gurdy. Really cool to see. Love to see, finally, best score in music getting its due.
But by far, the thing that caught me the most off guard, and I don't know about you, I sure as hell didn't expect them to announce Hades 2.
Much less a sequel from Supergiant, but...
Yeah, first time they've ever done that, too.
Amazing. Great reveal. Probably the best of the night, I think.
Yeah, I'm super pumped. I mean, they could have announced anything from Supergiant, and I'm going to buy it day one, but, like, when it's going to be a sequel to their best game, yeah, 100%. That's day one purchase. I didn't play any of the first Hades when it was in early access, and that might change for Hades 2.
Yeah, I agree with that. And such a cool trailer, too, where, like, you get the feeling, especially with the, Greek garland on the forehead and all that. It's a kind of similar vibe. You start to wonder, but then the eyes reveal with the bum, 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 with that Darren Core blick. I mean, just so good, so satisfying.
I'm excited. I'm very, very excited.
The Last of Us, we knew it was coming to PC. When is it coming? March 3rd, 2023. So basically, when the show's done airing its 9 episodes of its first season on HBO, and go play the game on PC. It's smart, but finally, more people will get to hear Gustavo Santaolalla's music.
I am surprised it took this long for it to hit PC, actually. And also, every time one of these PlayStation exclusives is announced for PC, it's just the one question that rings out across the internet of, hey, but Bloodborne, though?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, but where's Bloodborne, though? The fact that The Last of Us is hitting PC before Bloodborne is actual. The fact that God of War hit PC before Bloodborne is actual lunacy to me.
It makes you wonder what's tied up and all that.
Yeah, there has to be something stopping that game from hitting PC, because that's just money on the table that they're leaving there. Earthblade is the next game from Extremely OK Games, which are the developers of Celeste. It looks really cool, and Lena Raine has confirmed that she will once again be providing the soundtrack. So again, 2023 is looking like it's going to be a good year.
It is, except that game is coming in 2024. But you know what? Take all the time that you need.
Oh, yeah.
It's looking like it's getting maybe a little bit of inspiration from The Messenger. I got some platforming vibes from that game for sure. But yeah, I'm so ready for whatever the Celeste devs are doing next, and Lena Raine especially.
Yeah, Maddie Thorson and her team know what they're doing. I'm pumped.
As we expected, with Hideo Kojima in town in Los Angeles, Death Stranding 2, or DS2, I guess it's still like a placeholder name for now, but it was revealed with a cover of BB's theme by Ludwig Forssell, and that was neat to see. You could kind of get the hint pretty early on when it's like the black hands by a 2. It's like, oh yeah, this is happening. That's the Kojima font for like the text that appeared up on screen. But once that theme started coming in, it's like, oh yeah, all the more reason this is definitely a sequel to Death Stranding, which, okay, we'll see what comes of it.
And then Norman Reedus emerged from the shadows. I expected it to be, isn't he supposed to be making a horror game too? I kind of expected that to be what got revealed, but I guess not.
Yeah, I think people were expecting that there's the Overdose project, which has been rumored for a long time. I was almost expecting that to drop as well, but maybe another time.
We got more information on Tekken 8, the first gameplay footage, but we also found out that Akitaka Toyama, who we talked about in episode 97 for his work on We Love Katamari, which might also be getting a re-release, fingers crossed, He is working on the music for Tekken 8. I mean, I'm not a Tekken head. I didn't understand anything that was happening in that trailer except for people were getting punched, but people that do know say it looks good, so I'll take their word for it. We should talk about a Tekken game at some point, I guess.
Yeah, maybe. It's good Bandai Namco music. It's neat to see his name pop up. We follow him on Twitter, and he's like, yeah, I did the music to this trailer, and I'm also working on the game. It's like, oh, okay, neat. Horizon Forbidden West, one of the rumors going in was that DLC was impending, possibly called The Burning Shores, because of an area that was kind of locked off in the game, and that kind of looks like the Los Angeles area on the world map. Well, sure enough, Horizon Forbidden West Burning Shores is a DLC expansion that launches on April 23rd, only on PlayStation 5, which I found interesting. That game was a cross-generational game, but I guess to bring out fully what they want to do, it's only on PS5. We'll see how much of the Guerrilla Games team is back to compose for this one, including Yoris Demand, but who's to say? I'm down for that. More Horizon, just even more proof that franchise is cursed with Breath of the Wild and Elden Ring just usurping all the attention. But great series.
I have a bone to pick with that trailer. I'll take the robot animals. I could take the hologram technology. There is no way that far into the future the Hollywood sign is still standing.
Yeah, no way.
Absolutely no way. And I don't know why, but the instant I said that, I was like, no, I can't accept that. That's what takes away my suspension of disbelief. And lastly, we got a little bit more information on another trailer for Final Fantasy XVI, which still looks like it's going to be really, really good. Came with a release date at last. It's coming out on June 22nd, 2023. Of course, with a soundtrack by Masayoshi Soken. And that game looks really, really good.
I can't wait. I'm excited. Bring it on.
I am excited this is the first Final Fantasy game to come out when I've actually played any Final Fantasy games.
Oh my goodness. Oh, how cool.
So this will be the first one I buy at launch and play. Alright, that's all the Game Awards stuff out of the way. There's a lot of it. That's what the show is there for the most part, for announcing stuff, and that's fine. Let's talk about a video game that wasn't announced at the Game Awards, and also probably wasn't anywhere near the Game Awards. I don't know. It might have actually been in Games for Impact. I couldn't find that anywhere.
I don't think it was, but it sounds like it'd be up that alley for sure.
Yeah, it feels like one of the games that could have been in that category at the very least. Behind the Frame, The Finest Scenery was originally released for PC and mobile on August 25th, 2021, and then it got a Switch and PS4 release on June 2nd, 2022, earlier this year. It was developed by Silver Lining Studio and published by Akupara Games. So what is it? It is a point-and-click adventure game where the player acts through the eyes of a young female painter who is trying her best to complete a piece for an upcoming exhibition. Except one problem. Her paints seem to have gone missing, and she has to find them by solving various puzzles around her apartment, all the while performing her usual everyday routines such as making breakfast and brewing coffee. And the story is all told through this really good hand-drawn art. Heavily inspired by the work of Studio Ghibli. If you've seen any of the cutscenes from this game, they really, really worked hard to sort of copy the style of a Ghibli movie and stuff like that. The faces look very Ghibli. It's really well done. And, the animated cutscenes are some of the best quality 2D animated cutscenes I've ever seen in an indie game, maybe in a game. They're very good. And it's a very short experience. The game is about 45 minutes long. And there's also like a side thing that's like 20 minutes long. But, that's new. That just got added in 2022, I believe. I'd very much recommend it. It is very nice. And also, I think, has a very good sort of plot and ending to it. So, the questions for the game become, can you find all of the paint colors so that she can finish her piece in time? What is the significance of the older man that lives across the alley from her, who also appears to be a painter himself? What is our lady painter's story? And most importantly, who is she? This is where I will ask, what are your experiences with Behind the Frame?
I did not know this game existed, but you know what? It's neat to discover a game like this, especially when you bring it to the show, not only to see what it looks like, and judging by its launch trailer, and you see some video footage at the beginning of the episode, it definitely does fit that Ghibli bill. So I'm interested in that, and the soundtrack sounds really nice and pleasant. So I'm interested to learn more.
I don't remember how I found out about this game. Like, genuinely, I don't remember. I just sort of knew it existed one day, as far as I can tell. I've played it twice this year, actually. Near the beginning of the year, I played the PC version because I owned it for a while and I decided to finally get around to it. And then when it came out on Switch, I did the review over at Nintendo World Report, where I found out you can play it with touch controls on the Switch in handheld, which actually works really, really well. And it's probably the closest you're going to get to the mouse. In fact, it might be better than the mouse controls, honestly. I love it. It's very, very laid back. If you're just looking to kill an hour and you don't want to have to build that adrenaline or anything, this is a great game to do it with. Like you mentioned, the soundtrack is absolutely gorgeous. Just very, very nice to listen to. A calming sort of experience. And just in general, it's a nice game. Granted, for some reason, the ending hit me way harder the second time I played it than the first time. The ending is kind of melancholy, but it kind of just the second time hit me like a truck, and I don't know why, because I knew what was going to happen. So it's an interesting game, and I hope if people are looking for a shorter experience, they look towards this one. I don't think it's very expensive very often. I think it goes on sale on Steam quite a bit, so keep an eye on it. So I wasn't able to find a ton about the development of this game, unfortunately, because, it's a small game that not a lot of people have heard of in general. But I was able to find one interview with the head of the studio, head of Silver Lining. The game was developed by a team of 8 people, and the studio itself was founded in 2019. This is actually their second project, but it's the first one to actually make it to release. And Silver Lining is based in Taiwan, which I think makes this the second Taiwanese studio we've talked about on this show, because we talked about Red Candle.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wait, no. The Vose people are also Taiwanese, if I remember correctly.
Oh, yeah.
So we talked about 3.
Okay.
That was a long time ago. I'd completely forgotten about that. Director Wei-Chin Lin describes the game as, quote, a narrative-driven game with escape room coding, which that's a pretty apt description, actually. The game reviewed pretty well upon release. It's got a 73 on Metacritic right now. Most critics praised the narrative, the art, the overall relaxed vibe. All of that was regularly mentioned when critics talked about what they liked about the game, but the criticisms in general, the problems were the game does have kind of repetitive gameplay for a lot of it. Not super repetitive, but there are a couple actions that you do over and over and over again. And they fit into the narrative, I think, but it is also all right, I've done this 3 times now. I don't want to do it again. And that's understandable, but luckily, like I said, the game is 45 minutes long, so it doesn't go very long. It won Best Visual Art, Best Experience, Best Storytelling, and Best Indie Game at the NYX Awards, which is another awards show I've never heard of. We'll find a new one every couple months. And it won the Excellence in Visual Art and Best Overall Game Awards at the Asia Game Awards. Now, I also did not find a lot on my composer, and by didn't find a lot, I mean potentially didn't find anything. So here's the thing. Their name is Yuchain Wang. I found a Yuchain Wang on Instagram at Yuchain. That's YUUUCHENNW. And she's a musician. And so this actually happened to me when we did Sumire, where I found what seemed to be the composer. And the best way to confirm it was I scrolled down his feed and I saw a post about Sumire, and that's how I knew. So I was like, maybe she posted about Behind the Frame. And I scrolled down for 5 full minutes until I hit 2019. Not a single post about the game whatsoever. So I started looking into other stuff about this person, and I would find a discography that was just Behind the Frame and nothing else. And then I would find another site that listed their discography as like 4 albums, but none of them were Behind the Frame. I don't know if this is the person I was looking for. I genuinely still don't know. I looked for so long to try and find anything else about them, but that might be them.
And honestly, if they're Taiwanese, like, that may be the luckiest you can get on it.
Yeah, possibly. Like, I've never had the problem before where, like, I find somebody, it's like, I think this is them. Usually it's either, you can confirm either way, but even on, like, VGMDB, speaking of the discography, like, this is the only game that they're credited for on the site. It was quite an experience to, like, scroll through this Instagram and be like, am I being creepy, or are you the person I'm looking for? It could go either way at this point.
Don't double tap an image.
And the music was also done for this game by Sung Yoe Cho. And that's all I have. That's it. That's all the information that there is. So with that, let's jump in to the Critical 5, because as we both mentioned, this soundtrack is very nice. And one of my favorite songs on the soundtrack is actually Critical Track number 1. This is An Old New Day. I really love this piece a lot. I used to use it as the intro song to my streams, because it fits really well for that. And just in general, this song has this nice feeling of just living day-to-day life at home peacefully. And I believe that's a cello. It sounds like a cello to me.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The person playing the cellist, they're doing great. And I don't know, it's just a pleasant tune to listen to.
And it really sounds like it's all live recorded performances. I feel like for an indie game like this, you could probably get away with just MIDIs that, they sound good and all that. But, maybe some, like, it's possible that the light drums kind of, tapping, like, that could be a virtual instrument. But a lot of great stuff going here. Yeah, with the cello and with the piano and the drums. It's just very nice. And you're right, it has that cool vibe, almost like, it has a coffee shop feel to it in a way. I know it's the apartment and all that, but a nice loungy coffee shop. That's the feeling I get from it.
I mean, coffee is a weirdly large part of the plot. Drinking. You make coffee a lot in this game. You brew a lot of coffee. I think a coffee shop vibe is the best way to say it. It's got that relaxed sort of everybody's kind of keeping to themselves and doing their thing vibe. My actual favorite song on the soundtrack, though, is Critical Track number 2, This is Cat's Swing. So at a certain point in the plot, a cat from across the street gets into the apartment and just makes a mess. And this is the song that plays while you're sort of following its trail and trying to fix everything it messed up while also trying to find it. It's a really goofy part of the game, and I like it a lot. But this song, man, is so good. It is a completely different tone from the other two songs, and yet it still feels like it fits perfectly. Again, you have the cellist absolutely killing it. The bass is really fun, and just the general groove of the whole thing. It feels mischievous and also just fun to listen to, and I really, really love this song.
Absolutely. There's a mischievousness, there's a playfulness. There's a lot going here, and I like how in the clip you get the kind of wind down the string, but then goes right into the stand-up bass, and then just kind of adds those layers while having that kind of pace of like a cat's paw prints going around. I think that fits super well.
Yeah, I agree. Critical track number 3, we get a little bit more solemn slowly as we go. This is Sunken Leisure. So we're not sad, but the tone is definitely slowed down quite a bit from the first two tracks. I keep saying this, but I think this is another one of my favorite songs, just because this is the one that sounds the most Ghibli. When I hear this song, it kind of reminds me of some of the stuff in, like, Kiki's Delivery Service or something like that. It's a really nice piece. You got the trumpet in there now.
Even more proof that it's a live performed instrument, because
it sounds good.
Yeah, it actually sounds like a trumpet.
It sounds like a trumpet and not like an alarm that sort of sounds like a trumpet. It's a really, really nice piece, and the fact that you get the like back and forth of the trumpet and the cello makes it very pleasant to listen to.
I would love to know how many musicians were involved in this project. Like, is this all just the two of these composers? Like, and they happen to be, really good at all of these instruments, or do they know some friends and they kind of have this little chamber orchestra in a way, a little jazz ensemble in a way? Because yeah, the trumpet is unexpected and it's just adorable. Like the trade-off with the cello and the kind of play back and forth. This is really nice. I think the comparison to those Ghibli movies are really apt and appropriate.
If the person I found on Instagram is the correct person, if, from the looks of it, she specializes in guitar, but there are a lot of pictures with just like a group of people, so it is possible that it is multiple people. I don't know. That might not even be the person that we're talking about. Who knows?
Yeah, there's just not a lot of credits on this soundtrack for what got released as an official original soundtrack. Even there aren't really credits per track. It's just, music's by the two of them, and that's it. So
I wonder if I probably could have tried to find somebody in Akupara to ask, but because that's where you can buy the soundtrack, by the way, on Akupara Games Bandcamp page. and people should do that. It's a very good soundtrack, and you're not going to find it on YouTube. So you should absolutely give them your money for this soundtrack, which will also be demonstrated in critical track number 4. Nailed it. This is Memories of Colors. So this is when you're hitting the ending. It's getting closer. You're starting to realize what is going on, what the story is. And it's got this sort of sad feeling to it, but it's not a sad song. Like, if that makes sense. There's still, like, an air of happiness to it, hope a little bit, like, just a pleasant feeling in there, usually, like, mostly supplied by the flute, but, like, the piano and everything in this song just sort of gives it this nice balance between sad and just generally happy with life. And if that makes sense. I don't know if what I'm saying makes any sense whatsoever, but that is what I get when I listen to this one.
No, it does, and it's the rising melodic line that kind of gives it that lift. So I see where you're coming from with that. I agree with that. And even still, when I first hear it, especially at the start of the clip, like, I get Silent Hill vibes immediately. Not like the creepy kind, but you know how, like, Silent Hill 2, and how it dips into some piano tracks. And I kind of get the feeling there. As it continues, the lighter lines, especially as the notes are at a higher register, a higher octave, it kind of slips away from that. But just the kind of underpinning of the lower piano notes has that kind of Yamaoka tension to it, I think.
And critical track number 5, which is actually, maybe this one's my favorite. I don't know what my favorite song on the soundtrack is. All 5 of these are my favorite. Let's just go with that. This is The Color You Love the Most.
And I'll pray your name, circle the drain, and still wait for the warning sign. Close eyes and count to 3, then paint your wish with the colors you love the most. It will be spreading the way to the place where the story just began.
This is the credit song for the game. It's the only vocal piece in the game. I don't know who the vocalist is. It's not listed on the soundtrack, unfortunately. It could be Yuchain Wang. I don't know. This song is really, really good, and something about certain parts of the song do manage to sort of get, like, the emotional swell out of me a little bit. But it's just a really, really nice song. Granted, I can't understand what half the words are. Mostly because it's the way it's EQ'd, I feel like it makes it slightly harder to understand what's being said. But you can understand enough of the words to sort of get the emotions behind the song in general. And then, having played the game, you understand the emotions behind it in general too. And I think it all just sort of comes together. And this is, I think, the best evidence that the person I found on Instagram might be the right person, because there's a lot of acoustic guitar in this song. And like I said, a lot of her pictures had her sitting in front of a camera with an acoustic guitar. So that might not be solid proof. A lot of people play the guitar, but that certainly helps point that way a little bit.
What better way to wrap things up than with a vocal song in the credits, and one that's performed so well. You go back to the Ghibli inspiration. You could hear it there. You could hear it at the end of a Professor Layton game. Let's just say It's got that feeling, and wow, it's really nice to listen to. This was a pleasant surprise.
It works so well with the game's ending. The song and its lyrics and everything are very sort of retrospective. And the whole game is about memories and sort of how we choose to represent them and stuff like that. And I'm not going to say more than that because I think the way that it goes about it is very good and people should discover it for themselves. But yeah, no, this song works incredibly well with the tone that the game ends with. And another of my favorites in the game, I guess. 4 tracks on the cutting room floor, I got 2. The first one is Sunset Waltz. This song, of course, plays in the famous haunted house section of the... there's no haunted house section.
You got the 3/4 time signature, that's for sure. But that's just waltz.
This song, I think, is one that I really wish I could have put on the Critical 5. Simply because it's one of those... The thing is, these songs play during specific parts of the game, but not really, like, in sync with specific moments, except for Cat's Waltz, mostly. It's mostly just as the day goes on, the next song starts, and then the next song starts. And so I can't really nail down exactly when it happens, but I do know that this is one of the ones that had me humming along to it even the first time I played. So I know that I really, really like this song. And more of that cello. A waltz is always a very, very nice sort of type of song to listen to, even when it's not proving my theory of the creepiest time signature. And yeah, like I've said about pretty much all the songs on the soundtrack, it's just a nice song to listen to. I really like it.
Well, if it's called Sunset Waltz, it's probably closer to the end of the day. Once again, yeah, more acoustic guitar here, so that kind of leads some more evidence to Yuchain Wang's in her direction. So yeah, really nice. I can see why it's here on the cutting room floor, though. Like, the other pieces are really strong, and this is just a nice one to round things out. Just has to be brought up, especially if it gets stuck in your head, but I see why you've placed it where you did.
I'd put the whole damn soundtrack in the Critical 5 if I could. It's one of those. The second track on the cutting room floor is Color Fading. This is again very close to the end of the game. You are starting to realize what is happening and what the premise of the game is. And this one doesn't really have that sort of hopeful feeling that the other more solemn song had. And it's sort of like, I don't want to say emotional whiplash, because it's not really that. It doesn't change that fast. But it just sort of cements the whole thing of like, oh, I think I get what's happening now. I think I get what's going on. Aww. I associate it with a specific moment. I don't think it actually plays during that specific moment, but it is very indicative and has the same sort of vibe as that moment. So that's where it lives in my head.
This kind of wistful solo piano gives me theories on what's going on. I just might have to play this game to check it out and see if I'm right.
I feel like you're not, but I don't know. You'll have to tell me after we finish recording. But we'll see. If you are, I'm going to be incredibly impressed. I'm not going to lie. And what'll I never forget about Behind the Frame? It's just a nice game. It's not going to blow anybody away, I feel like. You're not going to walk away from it being like, oh, this is a transcendent work of art. But it is one that I don't think I'm going to forget anytime soon, at least, in general. I can't imagine that I would have played it twice had I not been on the review. But, I think a lot of people, especially a lot of people we know, should give this game a shot. It's not a huge time commitment, and you should try it out. So for our transition, we like to use a fan cover, fan remix. I actually managed to find one for this game, which is great. It's a cover of The Color You Love the Most, which is what I expected to find if I was going to find anything, except it's in Russian by the YouTuber Ellie Marshmallow. That's Elli Marshmallow. And it's just really good. I am not sure the lyrics translate into Russian as well as they could, but it's still, it's a really interesting thing to have found, and I'm glad that I found it. So please enjoy that, and we'll be right back.
Крутится слив, но сигнал подавать мне брось. Зажмурясь на счет 3, изобрази в ярких красках свою мечту. Она укажет тропу.
I'm surprised that you got to find a cover like that, but you know what? That was really good. So kudos there. Let's talk about our next game. And it's another protagonist on the box art that is facing right to left in profile. This is Shining Force. This is actually a listener suggested game, so shouts out to Razzle Dazzle. Thank you so much for your input. Ran the list by him and made sure that am I missing anything big? So good to know that was mostly on point, and just really appreciate the help. So time to do a game justice that I have never heard about, but it must be strange that I haven't, because Shining is a series of role-playing video games developed by Sega that has 39 entries to it when you consider all of the different spin-offs and things like that.
Oh.
The first game in the franchise, 1991's Shining in the Darkness, was a first-person dungeon crawler with randomly encountered turn-based battles. There are comparisons made to the Wizardry series and the Might and Magic series with this, but the series has undergone several genre shifts in the years, and that leads up to its most recent entry, 2018's Shining Resonance Refrain. It's now an action JRPG that's actually probably most similar to the Tales of series of games.
One of them came out 4 years ago? What?
Yeah. When you just see Shining in the words of, it's probably related to this series. But today we're talking about the second game in the franchise, which was another genre altogether. So, Shining Force Kamigami no Isan, or Shining Force, The Legacy of the Gods, was released in Japan for Sega Mega Drive on March 20th, 1992. I suppose the title translated for the West is also Shining Force, The Legacy of Great Intention, but we know the game as just Shining Force, when it released on Sega Genesis in North America on July 13th, 1993, and in Europe on Mega Drive also in July 1993. There are some fans out there that fondly remember this game as its remake, Shining Force Resurrection of the Dark Dragon, which released in June 2004 on Game Boy Advance. Now, Shining Force has been released as part of Sega collections across Dreamcast, PC, Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, but it also arrived standalone on Nintendo Wii Virtual Console in 2007, and it even had a stint on iOS from 2010 to 2015. Its standalone release also launched on Steam in 2011, where you can buy it for $1 today. So, if you're really interested to play an old Mega Drive Genesis game, $1. It is also part of the Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack offering of Sega games, if you happen to have that subscription library. Shining Force was developed by Climax Entertainment and Sonic Software Planning, and it is published by Sega. Shining Force is a top-down, turn-based, tactical role-playing game. Now you may hear that and think, that sounds a lot like its contemporary Fire Emblem. Well, Fire Emblem, of course, would be still years away from launching in the West, so Shining Force is generally seen as the first tactical role-playing game to have significant success in the US. You battle on square grids with allies that have different abilities. You defeat the enemy forces. You gain experience points. It's all pretty standard fare. What is different, however, is that even if the player army is defeated, the player can recover allies and retry the battle. No permadeath in this one. Also, you get to keep any experience that is obtained. So, regardless of the battle's outcome, you're still progressing, and there's no game over. The player's army gets stronger even upon its defeat. Although, if the protagonist dies during the defeat, you lose half your money. So try not to get him killed, I guess, for that punishment. Outside of battle, the game plays like a traditional JRPG, like Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest, where the player is able to walk around, interact with people, find treasure, buy equipment and items, outfit the army, and choose which of the army's members will be used in battle. Not much out there for the story of Shining Force. The description on its Steam page says, quote, "The land of Rune, in the kingdom of Guardiana, has been at peace for centuries until the hordes of Runefaust attack. Now, the evil forces of Runefaust are spotted near the Gate of the Ancients. As Max, a young swordsman of Guardiana, find out what Runefaust is after, stop their ambition, and bring back peace to the land of Rune. The fate of the world depends on the Shining Force and you." Basically, can Max and the allies he gathers stop the evil Cain and his Runefaust horde from reviving the Dark Dragon? Joe, here's where I'll ask you, what are our experiences with Shining Force?
So I knew of the name Shining Force, but I knew nothing else about it until literally just now. I didn't even know it was a tactics RPG.
Yeah, I did not know it was a Fire Emblem comp.
Like, I genuinely just knew that there was a video game called Shining Force. I think I knew it was a Sega game, and that is where my knowledge ended.
Yeah, likewise. I think I've heard the name thrown around different collections and things like that. And it's on Wii Virtual Console and things like that. But yeah, I had no idea, much less that it was a Fire Emblem comparison point, but also that this franchise is still going on in different forms and it has so many releases. I had no idea that Shining was a continued thing.
Yeah, I also did not know that.
So, good to bring to the show overall and to learn about its development, because despite the fact that it was the sequel to the successful Shining in the Darkness, Sega allotted only a minimal budget for the development of this game. And contrary to what you might think, Shining Force was not influenced by archetypal tactical RPG Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light. In fact, when he was asked about the game, the lead developer of Shining Force, Hiroyuki Takahashi, remarked, quote, "The tempo of that title was so bad that it wasn't something I even wanted to play."
Wow! So
just slamming on Fire Emblem, and instead he recalled that he wanted to make a game that was like Dragon Quest. Like, that was the big inspiration. He wanted to figure out how he and the team could, quote, take the battles from Dragon Quest and make them more fun. He also drew inspiration from an obscure Japanese PC game called Silver Ghost, which is, quote, a simulation action type of game where you had to direct, oversee, and command multiple characters. I would have thought there would have been at least some inspiration in another tactical RPG, but no, not at all. There was also a lot put into the battle scenes and trying to make them look cool. They had a kind of mock-up of what they wanted to do for one of them, and it was like, surprise, it takes 40 megabytes of RAM, which it's a whole lot on a Mega Drive cartridge at the time. It may not seem like a lot now, but they were talking about how they got to like compress it down to like 22% of what they wanted to originally. And that was like a big alluring point of the game, is the battle scenes at that time on that console. Then the game was eventually remade in 2004, as we mentioned, for Game Boy Advance under the title Shining Force Resurrection of the Dark Dragon. Quite a bit of changes in this remake, which seemed pretty interesting. This included an expanded plot, 3 new playable characters, 3 new battles, a ramping difficulty system, and of course, tweaks in the gameplay.
And of course, they called it Dark Dragon, and it definitely wasn't at all inspired by Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light.
Not at all. Why would it be? Of course, if you grew up and played this, it's interesting to hear the comparison points of the soundtrack. I listened to the GBA OST, and it's like, oh, I can hear why. Yeah, a lot of the tunes one for one, but just in better GBA sound fonts. So definitely some nostalgia if you played this one for sure. The Mega Drive version reviewed well at the time, with a game rankings average of about 80%, but there were also plenty of archived reviews that seemed to have it in the low 90s. So a lot of people were like, oh, this is an adventure unlike any other, especially if it's a Westward publication. Haven't really seen anything like this before, especially on a Sega console. Metacritic put the GBA port at 77, though. So I guess, slightly aged a little bit if you're remaking an older, tactical JRPG. In 2004, it may have aged a little bit. There's no sales data available, except that in Japan, it topped the Famitsu sales chart in April 1992. So it must have done well for games at the time, I suppose. The same thing when there aren't really any game awards, and Shining Force didn't really stand out in anything like that. So how has it stood the test of time? Well, the publication Mega placed the game at number 33 in their top Mega Drive games of all time. So I guess it's fondly remembered, but it's not the best of the best. Shining Force would continue with several sequels, though. After a couple of Japanese exclusive Gaiden games for the Sega Game Gear that would later get remade on Sega CD, the next Mega Drive installment would be 1993's Shining Force 2. Shining Force 3 would wait until 1998 on Sega Saturn, and would technically be broken up into 3 scenario releases in Japan, but the West only got the first. Shining Force Neo and Exa were 2005 and 2007 releases for PlayStation 2, respectively, but they decided to be action RPGs. But finally, Shining Force Feather returned to the game's tactical turn-based combat roots with a 2009 release on Nintendo DS, and it seems to be the last Shining game to carry the Force name amidst all of the spin-offs and everything. Likewise, the composer's story is a bit interesting and difficult to discern and track down. So the composer credited for the music in the original Shining Force is Masahiko Yoshimura. And Masahiko Yoshimura, he seems to be based out of Yokohama, Japan, but he is a ghost online to the point where there are fan speculation threads on Shining Force Central forums that wonder, where did he go? People think that they're pretty sure he's on YouTube and SoundCloud as Brain Brown, but overall he just seems to be very private. If he is on Twitter at Brain Brown, he says he does some consulting for Prism Consulting. And even then that's translated from Japanese, so who honestly knows? People wonder what happened to him because Masahiko Yoshimura's discography includes Firehawk Thexter, The Second Contact, Shining in the Darkness, and Shining Force. That's it. That's all. So he seems to be around if he is this Brain Brown individual today, but doesn't seem to have much about if he continued to work in the game industry, if he continued to work in music in general. Just a puzzling situation overall that I feel has a lot of comparison points to your composer research for Behind the Frame.
Actually, yeah, you found a social media account it might be them, and that's really funny, actually.
When the hardcore fans on forums dedicated to the franchise are stumped, I'm going to chalk it up to that one as, that's just weird. But let's get to the critical 5 tracks for Shining Force using that Sega Genesis, that Mega Drive sound font. And we start with an interesting one here. This first critical track here is Cheerful Street Corner. All right, fun things with the titles for these tracks here. So, Shining Force music has a couple soundtrack releases. One was like, I think maybe like a Sega CD interpretation, so it's like a different sound font overall. There also seems to be a soundtrack for the Resurrection of Dark Dragon GBA remake, which has English translations for titles. That's where we're getting these from. But also online, people are taking their original Japanese titles and then interpreting it as like the simple explanation and where they play in the game. So for each of these, we'll have a few kind of descriptions on this front. Cheerful Street Corner is titled in Japanese as Yokina Machikado, and people describe it as the standard city theme, which kind of makes sense. It definitely sounds like a town in a JRPG, whether it sounds like almost like in a way Pokemon may have been inspired by it in a way. Also, I get like a Willy Wonka kind of vibe from the rhythm that goes on here and the little melody there. But yeah, if you're kind of visiting the town to talk to people, you're probably going to hear this one quite a lot. Even though it sounds rather different than I think a lot of the other tracks, it's still that, oh yeah, we've played Dragon Quest before. We've played Final Fantasy before. Let's do a town theme.
Yeah, this isn't what I expected it to sound like at all. I too like the festival music in Harvest Moon games.
Yes.
That's all I can think of. That's the immediate thought that came to mind. This also isn't the MIDI sound font I expected to hear in general. I don't know why. It sounds like a Genesis sound font, but also this isn't how I'm used to Genesis games sounding.
Interesting. Yeah, you definitely hear in the lower registers like, okay, that's Genesis based for sure, but I will assure you that it gets a little more clear as we continue into the Critical 5, and we do that with track number 2 here. This is Shining Force. What's titled in Japanese as Hikari no Gunzei gets translated out to, I guess, Shining Force, or at least on some of these title interpretations. Makes sense. Hikari, light. Maybe you interpret that as shining. This is the World Map 1 theme. And yeah, that makes sense. It sounds like you're exploring an overworld of some kind. I think the big standout here, not only do you hear more of some synthesizers and tracks that are like, oh yeah, that's Genesis music for sure. But the standout is, I believe, what are the square waves, where they're interpreted to sound like a drum cadence and a snare drum roll and beat. You will hear that will only intensify, and I think that's the most impressive part of the soundtrack for sure, at least on this iteration of the game. But yeah, especially when the percussion drops out and you kind of get that very JRPG world theme that kind of sounds like softer, slower, and drawn out with a lot of kind of bouncing synths around. You definitely hear where it's inspired from, but I also like the militaristic readying the troops for battle. Let's move to the next location with that snare beat. We're going to hear that more.
Yeah, this sounds a lot closer to what I was expecting, though. You mentioned Pokemon for the last one. For some reason, the melody of this one makes me think of Pokemon, just in general. It doesn't have the same tone as a Pokemon game. It is very clearly, obviously, it wouldn't have the same tone as a Pokemon game. Pokemon would have the same tone as it. This came first. But it definitely does feel a lot more Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest inspired in general. And yeah, this is an overworld theme. I can definitely picture it. So it does its job very well, honestly.
Number 3 on the Critical 5 is sometimes interpreted as Battle 3, but it is also titled Worthy Rival. Worthy Rival, or A Worthy Rival, is sometimes attributed to a mid-boss theme. It's also titled in Japanese as Kotekishu. So interesting to wonder about what, since I didn't play it, what the context of this track really would involve as a worthy rival. And it's one that seems to be fondly remembered as, high stakes for this kind of encounter as a mid-boss. People definitely point to this one as this is like the sneaky good one, the sneaky, best battle theme. Amongst all of the battle themes in there, people seem to have fond memories for this one. It's easy to see why. There's a lot of good energy. Again, you're hearing the picking up with the snare drum. And it's nice to hear how even this 16-bit soundtrack, you get the sense that it could easily be orchestrated, and you can hear how Masahiko Yoshimura wants that to happen, but just working with the limitations of the time.
This is Final Fantasy 1 as hell. I hear this, and the battle music of Final Fantasy 1 is all I can think of. It's very good. I do agree that the fast sort of snare beat is a lot of fun and gives it this good energy to it. It's a pretty good battle theme. It feels, again, not quite what I expected from a game called Shining Force, but it's pretty good. I like it.
The final boss theme probably has to make it to the Critical 5, right? But it's a good thing that this game has a good one. Number 4 on the Critical 5 tracks for Shining Force. This is Armageddon. Man, Yoshimura is throwing all the tricks at this one. You've got some sliding notes. You've got some trills going on. You get key changes at the beginning of the piece before the clip. You got some heavy panning in the right to start things off. A lot of tricks being used here, and just put everything out there for the final boss, which is also titled in Japanese as Armageddon, which, that makes sense for such a big confrontation, probably with that dark dragon. You would have to imagine that we're just bringing everything out here, and the Final Fantasy, the Dragon Quest comparisons are right there, but I think this is a really interesting piece for its time, and especially for the system that it was on.
Okay, so I'm going to compare it to another Final Fantasy song, but it's different this time. The one that it reminds me of is a song that wouldn't exist for another, 5 years. Why does this remind me so much of One Winged Angel? Certain parts of it.
Yeah.
I don't know why. This is a really, really good piece. I very much dig this, though it sounds a lot more NES than Genesis for some reason to me. Just in terms of the instrumentation. But it's got a really good energy to it. You could definitely guess that this is the final boss if you were made to guess that for some reason. And I don't know. I really dig the energy to it. I dig how it sounds. You can hear the stakes in it, sort of. I don't know what the stakes are. I assume you don't either.
Probably Dark Dragon or Shadow Dragon. Dark Dragon.
No, Shadow Dragon's the Fire Emblem. Dark Dragon. See, this is why you need to name your games differently, games industry.
They're probably honestly named the same thing in Japan, and it's just different interpretations. Let's be real.
That is highly possible. You can feel the stakes of this song. I think it does a very good job at being just the general feeling of a final boss.
I agree. Probably my favorite one, if we had to pick one. But you gotta include the main theme. What is the main theme of Shining Force? The title screen has a little fanfare. It's short. We weren't gonna include it. But the main theme does come back in the staff roll. And so this is Traveler from Distant Times. This track is titled in Japanese as Haru Kanaru Toki no Tabibito, which I guess translates out to Traveler from Distant Times. The staff roll, the credits plays, and it is this main theme that gets used for Shining Force with this big fanfare that sure sounds like a military fantasy with a little bit of sci-fi sprinkled in there. This bum ba bum ba da 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 bum ba da da da. That's kind of the sound you want for your main theme, and it's good to use it here. Interesting how I just think of Chrono Trigger a little bit, Too Far Away times with its credits. And again, the softer part works really nicely here after the big fanfare. So it's a good kind of up and down sounding, just with the energy and the soaring feeling with also the calmer, more reflective part. It's a nice theme and good to represent to round out the Critical 5 for this game.
This is the fantasy ending track. I can feel them walking into the sunset after they have won the day. And it's very good at that. It sounds very triumphant. You pointed out there's this sci-fi-ish, though I feel like that's more because of the Genesis sound chip. I think it's the bass that really does it, that crunchy Genesis bass. This is the one where I hear it and I'm like, oh yeah, that's a Genesis song. The others don't sound like what I usually think of when I think of a Genesis piece, but this one definitely has the parts that make me think Sega Genesis.
Couple tracks on the cutting room floor here. This took the most shuffling with Razzle Dazzle's help, so thank you with that. I've got 2 here, and the first of these is Light, Attack the Enemy. Makes sense that if the game is all about having these battle scenes that are animated and look really cool, especially when, 2 forces are kind of confronting each other. It's the attack scenes in Fire Emblem, right? But it's not Fire Emblem. It's not inspired by that. But if a track has to play and it's the battle scene theme, it's titled in Japanese as Hikari yo Teki wo Ute. And I guess it is Light, Attack the Enemy, even though it has other different interpretations. There's light, and there's also attack and enemy can get translated in many different ways. But this is like a 40-second track, and so that would represent this kind of scene here. I'm sure it is a classic for the game, and good to put here, and at the cutting room floor at the very least. So a good inclusion.
Something about the octave that this song is in doesn't do it for me. It's really high pitched. It's a bit too high pitched for me. That being said, though, I mean, I can picture it being in like the battle scenes. Yeah. Where I'm used to, like, modern Fire Emblem has just like dynamic versions of each piece, but playing a GBA Fire Emblem right now, they don't have that. They have a specific song that plays when you go into battle. So I assume this is the same thing, and I guess it gets that job done. Just something about the octave of the register it's in. I'm not a massive fan of this one.
I get you. And then to show the diversity on the soundtrack, this one caught my ear in particular. This is When the Light Goes Out. Titled in Japanese as Hi no Kiruyu Toki. This is the sad event theme. So basically the track where if you're trying to tug at the heartstrings and the melodrama, this is what you'll use in the game. And it's effective. I'll give it that. It sounds sad and somber and in this minor key. And it just really caught my ear as one, something different, but two, pleasant sounding, just with using the instruments that were available at the time, it really channels the emotions that they're going for. And I think it's mission accomplished there. It's not the battle, but yeah, if you've got these beats in your story and you want to kind of twist those feelings, this is a good one to use.
Yeah, I agree. This is a very different piece from everything else. It sure is the sad event music. You can feel that. And it sounds very good. I generally really like this song. I think this might be among my favorites. Not quite Armageddon, but pretty good. I like it a lot.
I agree. Yeah, just really nice to listen to that it's there on the soundtrack. Is it my favorite? No, I agree. I think that's still Armageddon, but good to represent on the cutting room floor. So what will I never forget about Shining Force? One, learning about the franchise and all of its games, and that Shining Force is a Fire Emblem contemporary. Wow. Of course, the Shining Force representing the group of allies that you pull together, and that they are the force that is shining against the Dark Dragon. really neat to hear and learn about this, and then also compare it to the Game Boy Advance remake and hear how the tracks are very similar, just in that better font. So just wow, to learn about that and really expand the knowledge. I hope I did that justice, learning about it for the first time, but hopefully you listening out there, learning about it, you've also learned some things about this game.
You know, if it's on NSO, maybe it's worth giving it a shot for at least just a little bit. I'll be real. If I had to take a guess, it's not going to be my thing, but it sounds interesting enough that I'd probably be willing to give it a brief shot at least.
Maybe once you give yourself a breather from Fire Emblem on Smash to Pieces there.
Yeah, that might be a good idea.
So these two games with Behind the Frame, the finest scenery, and Shining Force, yeah, as you can tell, very different games, very different soundtracks, but that left profile on the box art. Sometimes that's all it takes. That's all it takes. And that will do it for us this week on Original Soundchat. You can find me on Twitter at Pete Speakeasy. Joe is over at String Pixel. The video version of the show is on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, but it's that MP3 podcast version that you want. That's hosted by Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. It's where Joe's other podcast, Smasher Pieces, is hosted, and you can find Smasher Pieces and Original Soundchat wherever you get your podcasts on catchers all around the globe. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, even on Spotify, where we have a feed of podcast episodes, but also a playlist where if we talk about a video game track on this show and it's on Spotify, it gets added to this big, monster, continuously growing playlist. Joe, what's being added this week?
So Behind the Frame is on Spotify, so that'll be in there. There are a lot of Shining Force games on Spotify. None of them are this one.
Interesting.
There's like 3 or 4 games called Shining Force on there, but they all have subtitles, so none of them are this one.
Well, maybe it's worth seeing if like The Legacy of Great Intention or The Legacy of Gods is among those subtitles, but I don't know. That is very strange there. Anyway, when you're done listening, you can find the show on social media at Soundchat OST. Leave some feedback for us. How are we doing with these episodes? Give us some feedback there. Also, we'll take suggestions. Like I said, Shining Force was a listener suggestion for a game, and so we'll take yours as well there. Joe, who are we talking about next week?
Boy, next week's going to be a thing. I'm talking about Kevin Mante.
And I will be talking about Norihito Sumitomo for our last episode of the year before Best of 2022.
And let me tell you, everybody, what a combo.
It sure is. Oh my gosh. All right, to play us out, as Joe said, we like to highlight a fan cover, a fan remix, whether it's on YouTube, OC Remix, wherever. Over on YouTube, Connor Engstrom Music put an epic metal cover together of a Shining Force medley. And so the clip that we'll use here highlights his take on Worthy Rival, but it's a good medley overall for Shining Force medley, so please give that a listen. Thank you so much for listening this week on Original Soundchat. We'll see you next time. Take care.